Welcome to a special edition of the Coal Nation podcast, brought to you by the American Coal Council. I'm Steve Reed, and today we're coming to you on location from beautiful Park City, Utah, where the industry is gathered for the Coal Innovation and Market Strategies Conference. This week, leaders from across the coal supply chain are here sharing insights, solutions, and strategies shaping the future of coal in America and around the world. From market trends to groundbreaking technologies, this event is about charting the next chapter in our industry together. I'm joined by my colleague, Keli, and throughout this episode, we'll be bringing you conversations with some of the incredible speakers and thought leaders who are here at the conference. You'll hear their perspectives, stories, and innovations, all captured right here in person at Coal Innovation and Market Strategies 2025. Let's get started. Hello, I'm Steve Reed with the American Coal Council, and I'm sitting here with Randall Luthi, who is the Policy Director for the Wyoming Governor's Office. We are at the ACC's Coal Innovation and Market Strategies Conference in Park City, Utah, and we're just doing a quick podcast here with individual presenters at the conference. And Randall is going to be talking about Wyoming energy and coal. And thought we'd start off with just asking Randall to give a little overview of his presentation.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Steve. I'm excited to be here, and you know, what a tough place to have a conference.
Yeah, it's rough, huh?
In August. It's hard. It's really tough. But the purpose, or what I'm going to cover on my presentation, is mainly what a difference a year makes.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's actually a presentation that's focused somewhat on the changes of what the Trump administration have done, some of the early positives we have had. But I think overall, I'm going to talk about it's an attitude change and how important an attitude change is for the coal market, how important it is for regulators, and even more important, I think, is how important it is for policymakers, whether that be at the federal or state level.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. What a difference a year makes. So obviously talking about that a little further on what a difference a year makes. A year ago, there was a moratorium on leasing of federal lands specifically in Wyoming that you guys rely a lot of for the revenue from coal mining and mineral mining. But so with the changes now, that's opened up federal lands again to federal leasing. We're seeing a lot of changes along those lines, but how do we bake those in so we're not at the whims of the political calendar every 4 years?
Precisely. I mean, you know it as well as anyone. Coal markets, utility markets really don't do well in a short-term 2 or 4 year cycle. Yeah. It takes a lot longer than that. So what we have done, unfortunately, the Trump administration, Secretary Burgum was just right off the bat, went and looked at those, we call them resource management plans, and that was the Buffalo area resource management plan, and saying, you know, we're going to redo them. We're going to amend them. We also have the Rock Springs area resource management plan that is now currently under revision. And I think what you're going to get out of it is a much more balanced, a multiple use of lands. Frankly, the Biden administration had turned it practically BLM into a park service.
Yep.
And that's not what they're meant to be. They were never meant to be that way. And it just made it more and more difficult to get natural resource, particularly coal, oil, gas, uranium, and even though not energy, even trona to an extent, all of which are very important to Wyoming, starting to get them back into the market. And it's really the market that should drive this. But we all know both state and federal government has a pretty heavy thumb on that market sometimes.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think, all of us in the coal industry know how important Wyoming is to the power generation and consistent power generation in the United States. So, with the PRB being the largest coal resource in the world. So we appreciate the state of Wyoming very much and appreciate you taking time to take a few minutes and talk to us and look forward to your presentation.
Absolutely. Look forward to it as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Randall.
Yep.
I'm Keli with the American Coal Council, and we're continuing on with our conversations. I'm excited to have Morgan Snook here with us. She's a thermal price reporter on the coal side for S&P Global. Thank you so much for coming to our conference here in Park City. What's the one message that you really want to share with not only our conference attendees, but those that are listening to our podcast about spot thermal coal pricing and kind of what you're seeing in this space?
Yeah, so the core message I hope to convey is that even though coal is facing a structural decline in the U.S., it'll continue to provide a security buffer for everything from when natural gas freezes up and becomes inoperable. It helps insulate against the volatility of gas markets by allowing, ratepayers to pay a reasonable cost for coal when they can switch. It's also a hugely important asset for our allies. It helps to maintain energy security when the traditional sources of supply are disrupted, both domestically and abroad. So basically, I kind of wanted to highlight coal's resilience and adaptability, even despite its kind of structural decline. It's still a very vibrant space.
When you think about kind of the pricing structures, you've been watching it since, I think you said like 2021, and then you've dipped back into history. When you look kind of forward in our near term, what's the biggest challenge you think coal potentially faces in that pricing space?
Sure. I mean, obviously, pressure from competing generating fuels like natural gas and also intermittent renewables, which have a zero marginal cost, it has to compete with. The transition will be a challenge for coal, but coal is also very well positioned to be relevant even throughout the transition. As we've seen here, in the past 5 years, it's been called upon whenever natural gas gets too expensive. And with price spikes as high as $9 per MMBTU as recently as 2022, coal really comes in and saves the day so that ratepayers aren't paying through the roof during those times of volatility.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Morgan with S&P Global. We're so glad to have you on our podcast.
Thank you, Kelly.
You're
Great
welcome.
to be here.
This is Steve Reed with American Coal Council again, and I am here with Gavin Clark. He is a PhD student in industrial systems and engineering at University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Gavin is going to be presenting tomorrow morning at the conference. And Gavin, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you plan to talk about and present on?
Yeah, so I plan on talking, well, first and foremost, about a couple different math-based frameworks that are used in industrial engineering. And they're really about how we balance structure around risk, or how we balance preparation versus response around risks as well. And so all of this math-based way is about looking at numbers behind being ready.
Okay, in layman's terms, so obviously in the coal industry, for example, or at a power plant, there's a lot of factors that go into success.
Yeah.
There's equipment readiness, there's fuel delivery, there's the unknowns like weather, there's things like that. So how do you roll all that into a math equation and make it make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's actually the second half of the presentation. And the first step is really properly calibrating the risk that would be facing a coal plant in this example. And so I've taken 25 different metrics that are all from different public data sources and put them into 6 categories. So we have weather, labor, fuel supply, utilization, all those things you just talked about.
So then how do you calculate into that the massive unknowns? Say you got it like a COVID-19 or something like that. A good example would be, for COVID, obviously it shut everything down. And I ship a lot of coal by rail. So the railroads had to lay off massive amounts of employees, and then then the recovery was much quicker than expected, post-COVID. And then they went to bring back employees, and they didn't get near the return ratio that they expected. So all of a sudden you're in this, trying to catch up phase. So how do you factor in these big unknowns like that?
So how I'm choosing to approach it is what's called tri-level optimization. And that's one of those balancing acts that I was talking about, where as long as you properly calibrate or anticipate a certain risk, which in your case, it sounds like that's a labor risk.
Yep.
You want to have just the right amount of preparation that's not too costly to where you can still effectively handle things like on the fly after the fact.
Is that by having a bigger buffer?
It could be a buffer. It just like a good example actually would be, if you remember Storm Area 51, where it was in 2019, there was a viral Facebook event.
Okay.
Where a bunch of people were going to storm Area 51 in the middle of it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the Air Force really overprepared for that.
Okay.
Right. It seemed way worse than it actually turned out to be. They brought in airmen to provide security, guns, and everything to prepare for this mass of people. Well, only about 300 people showed up, and the staff that was originally there, the security staff, could have handled it.
Yeah.
So that's over preparation.
Sure.
where, you don't necessarily want the opposite either, where you just leave everything to chance of whoever's going to show
Kind
up.
of like January 6th or something.
Anything like that, right? How much
Yeah.
do I prepare versus
Yeah.
respond to? And if there's a perfect balance, that's actually the least costly.
And so taking that back to, say, the coal industry, for example, running a power plant, have you modeled different types of power plants, like a gas plant versus a coal plant? And
not between gas and coal. Right now, I'm at the first stage, which is properly calibrating or anticipating risks. So I've developed a risk index score that's for over 200 U.S. coal plants, coal in specifically.
Okay.
And we look at those 6 categories and score them. And so right now, if a coal plant or an operator was to look at the risk score, they'd make decisions about how to do that balancing act by themselves in their head.
So will that then point out their biggest risks? Or how does that, then they can prioritize, or how?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, you could look at it and say, well, what's your leading risk? Then you could go down into the submetrics. So say your leading risk is weather. Well, is it flooding events, heating, freezing, so forth?
Yeah. And then you figure out how to deal with that, then move on down the list, I assume. Huh?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, since I'm hosting the panel tomorrow that you're going to be speaking on, now I can speak a little more intelligently
You'll
about
be well-versed. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Gavin, very much. Appreciate your time. And we look forward to hearing you present tomorrow morning at ACC.
Okay.
And welcome back to Coal Nation. I'm Keli Sweet with the American Coal Council, and I am pleased to have with us Seth Schwartz with Energy Ventures Analysis. Seth, thank you so much for coming out to Park City to be with us today.
Thank
As
you,
you
Keli.
Think about the messaging that you gave to us here at the American Coal Council and our audience. Well, what are the key messages you want to share, not just to us, but that those listening to our podcast?
That the political and economic environment for coal has changed over the last year and is a lot more positive, but it will be a big fight with interests who are committed to trying to move this country away from using coal or producing coal at all. And the members of Coal Nation need to be committed to help push this forward.
What would be like the number one thing that you would say people can do to help make this push, to be that voice for coal?
People can talk to their neighbors and friends about the importance of coal in keeping reliable electric power supply in this country, keeping costs down when we're facing rising rates because of push to uneconomic sources of power, and threats to the reliability of the grid with increasing number of blackouts because of a lack of coal-fired power.
So where do you see this kind of going with the administration over the next 2 years, and how can that help us longer term?
Well, this administration has done a lot to try to reverse the destructive policies of the last decade, but they are going to be opposed strongly in court fights in trying to change both some rules across the country, not just environmental rules, leasing rules, production rules that the prior administrations have tried to put in to hamstring producing, transporting, or consuming coal in this country and exporting it to other countries. What I think maybe people may not be aware of is that while the United States has reduced its coal use by half in the last 15 years, the rest of the world is dramatically increasing their coal consumption. Coal is at a record high globally in production and consumption. The countries of China, India, and all across Southeast Asia are rapidly building coal-fired power plants, coal-fired steel facilities, coal-fired cement plants in order to improve their economies, modernize their country. And the United States is going to be left behind as the rest of the world uses an economic source of energy, and we don't.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you so much for listening to Coal Nation.
Welcome back to Park City. I'm Steve Reed with the American Coal Council. I'm joined this afternoon with Mark McClure. He is a partner at CCIG, who are in the process of working to develop the Oakland bulk and oversized terminal at the Port of Oakland, California. Mark was one of our presenters today, and glad he can join us on our podcast. But Mark, I just wanted to talk with you a little bit, and if you could give us a quick overview of your presentation this morning.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate being back here in Park City at the ACC conference. We started a project in Oakland back in 2013, broke ground on the infrastructure with the plan of building a new West Coast export facility for the commodities in the Western states, mainly Utah, where we are now, Wyoming, Colorado, Nevada, maybe Arizona, understanding that these facilities don't come along very often, and there was an opportunity to build a new one here on the West Coast near the Port of Oakland. And unfortunately, we got a few setbacks. We got into litigation with the city of Oakland over the last 8 years, but I was happy to report to the group this morning that we anticipate that litigation being resolved by the end of this year. And we've been talking to potential operators and beneficial cargo owners that are excited about the potential for a West Coast facility to export their products.
Great. So, and it sounds like the next step is the city is taking it on to the Supreme Court of California. Is that
That's correct?
Appealing?
There was 2 lawsuits over documents that we had with the city. We had a development agreement, which is typical in California for large projects like this. That was challenged in federal court, and we won. After we won that dispute, the city focused on our lease. We have a 66-year lease with the city of Oakland for 2 berths at the port and a rail yard and enough space, about 20 acres, to build storage capacity for the operation.
Okay.
They tried to terminate that lease. The state court ruled in 2023 that the lease was improperly terminated and that it was in full force and effect. They appealed that decision to the California Appellate Court. That was recently ruled in our favor about 45 days ago. And the city recently petitioned to the California Supreme Court to challenge that appellate court decision.
Okay. So is that a given then that the Supreme Court will take that up, or is it up to the court?
It is up to the court whether they hear it or not. Typically, they respond within about 60 days. And typically the threshold is if the lower court and the appellate court disagree. In other words, if they conflicted, that would be something that the Supreme Court would adjudicate. Or if it was a constitutional claim.
But in this case, they agreed, right? The lower court.
The lower court and the appellate court both agreed on every point, and there is no constitutional claim. This is when you boil down to it, it's a landlord-tenant dispute on a lease, so it's a contractual claim,
right? Which
the Supreme Court doesn't typically hear.
And Oakland's main issue with your lease was they wanted to exclude fossil fuels, right?
They wanted to exclude coal specifically and fossil fuels generally, pet coke and other products that they deemed bad commodities. So to speak.
I guess never mind the fact that Indonesia exports 550 million metric tons of coal per year.
Right.
So kind of backing up to the actual infrastructure of what you're trying to develop. What size vessels can you load there? What's your draft situation?
So the Army Corps, through their program with the Port of Oakland, drafts the channel at 50 feet for the larger container vessels. So our ambition is to get to Cape-size vessels, and that would require some dredging. That would probably require an articulated ship loader to go over the water a little bit to get to that.
Reach the beam.
Yeah, reach the beam.
Yeah.
But all of that has been studied, and we're fairly certain that we can achieve that draft.
Okay.
And what that creates for the shippers is, a very efficient way for them to export their product.
Sure.
right now in the Bay Area, there's coal being exported through Stockton and Richmond. And the program they have is to load first in Stockton, come down the Delta, and then top off in Richmond.
Right.
I think they're using Panamax vessels.
They are. That's correct.
The operation to get to a full vessel is a little more complicated.
Right.
Whereas in Oakland, we could get right to deep water with a larger vessel and create some economies to scale.
And of course, Richmond goes away at the end of next year, right?
2026. That's correct.
Yeah. So that ability to top off goes away with it. So access to markets is going to be challenging.
Right.
So, yeah.
And, in fairness to some of these Western states that I think have been challenged in finding a West Coast port to export their products, specifically coal. The federal government contributes a lot of money through grants to West Coast ports, also the Port of Oakland, for rail infrastructure, dredging, shore power infrastructure. So I think it's a little bit disingenuous for a local municipality to try and preempt federal trade or international trade when they're getting funds from the federal government.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we need to pay close attention to that. And I think this administration is more focused on those issues than the last one.
Yeah, well, certainly, as we were talking at the conference, we've seen a lot of changes in the industry in the last year or so, since we were here last year.
Yes.
So, and remind me again on rail access, you guys are Union Pacific, correct?
So the facility is actually dual served.
Okay.
So both BN and UP have access to the Port of Oakland. They both have yards there. UP owns their yard. BN leases a yard from the Port of Oakland. So one of the benefits or value propositions we feel we can offer the marketplace is that this is a dual served facility that can accept both class ones.
Yeah. And I think, obviously I know you're discussing Utah coal because that's the most economical to get there, but ultimately if you grow enough, you might have designs on looking at PRB coal as well. Is that correct?
Yes, they're right now the Utah coal, I think their preferred route is through Stockton and then Richmond. And as you pointed out in 2026, that Richmond option is going to go away.
Right.
So I think there's, probably a couple million tons of volume that we could divert from that current program to Oakland.
Yeah.
And then Wyoming, the Powder River Basin coal is also, I think, a fairly good from a geographic standpoint, a good run to Oakland from Wyoming, and that would be UP as well.
Yeah.
So that could add significantly to the volume of the terminal.
Well, and I think the criticality of dredging that to where you can do capes, if you're looking at PRB, then becomes critical.
Correct.
Because the markets that the lower CV coal like PRB is going to serve. That's going to be your Korean markets and things like that really want to focus on sending their Cape vessels on the long routes.
Right.
So if you're looking at, I think that was the Achilles heel with the whole Longview situation.
Yeah.
On the Columbia was they couldn't load Capes.
Yeah.
They were focused on PRB, but they couldn't load Capes. So that was always challenging from that standpoint. So it's going to be critical for you guys.
Yeah. You start to learn about all these things. I got quite an education in logistics of these commodities when we started this project, and there was a lot of stuff that we obviously studied before we started it, but as you progress and markets change as well, so you make adjustments where you can, but based on all the analysis and studies, even from the city and the port side, it was pretty evident that this was going to be a very likely port for Utah and Wyoming commodities.
Absolutely.
Just based on the rail infrastructure and the distance from the mine to the port.
Right. Well, Mark, thanks so much. Appreciate you joining me on this and hanging around after the conference.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
Thank you for joining us on Coal Nation.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate
it, bud.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Keli Sweet with the American Coal Council, and I'm pleased to introduce you to Deke Williamson. When we think about coal, some of the first images you think about are metallurgical coal for steel, thermal coal for generation, but what Deke's doing at ARC is completely different. So Deke is the Chief Operating Officer. He presented today here at our conference. Deke, tell us a little bit about what you want to share about what you're doing with coal that's different.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the technology that we've created, our patented technology, we're able to take coal fines and make a usable product. In particular, we make activated carbon. So with the activated carbon, we can re-agglomerate these fines, and we can use it to take contaminants out of the water we drink, the air we breathe, the soil our children play in, and have another alternative use for coal.
Excellent. What's the kind of market for that here in the United States?
So it's quite vast, actually. So we currently serve 140 municipalities in treating their water, as well as treating biogas and then flue gas for power generation. Also, we're able to use this to remediate soil and block contaminants out of soil, as well as use in gas masks.
So when you think about where you're at today, what's kind of the future for the technology that you're continuing to develop and deploy as you look at all of the coal assets and available coal in the United States?
Absolutely. So I think as we look to the future, we can take our technology and we can use that to remediate spoil sites. So think of it as, sites where washed coal or fines would have been deposited and then topped with soil and reclaimed that away. We can actually take those fines out, make a usable product out of it, and then reclaim the landscape back to original.
Excellent. Deke, thank you so much for being here with us at the American Coal Council Conference in Park City. Hi, I'm Keli Sweet with the American Coal Council, and I'm pleased to be here with Damien Machamp from 8 Rivers. Damien, thank you so much for being part of our conference here in Park City, Utah. As you think about your presentation and the technology that you're working to develop in this space, well, what do you want to communicate to our conference attendees and listeners of our podcast?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things for 8 Rivers is our understanding that coal is an extremely important resource in the energy mix, and that coal consumption globally really hasn't decreased since the 1800s. And as a result of that, there are innovative and better ways to utilize coal that not only produce 24/7 clean power, but could also help other industries within the fossil sector.
Yeah. Share a little bit about the technology that you're actually working on and some of the partners you're collaborating with.
Yeah, so the technology we're developing is called the alum-Fetvet cycle. This is a direct-fired, semi-closed, supercritical CO2 power cycle. It's a new thermodynamic cycle for power generation that allows you to burn any fossil fuel, in this case coal being converted to syngas, but inherently capture all the CO2 and actually turn the CO2 from the problem into the solution, in that the CO2 is used to drive the turbine blades, and then the exhaust of the plant ends up being 100% CO2. So you can easily hook that up to pipelines and take it to things like enhanced oil recovery. So it's a reliable and flexible source of energy that eliminates nearly all the arguments against coal that we've heard over the past few decades.
Where do you kind of see the future of your technology, either just domestically within the United States or on a global scale?
I think globally, when we're successful in deploying the first plant, there will be no arguments in deploying multiple of those plants across the United States. But I think in emerging markets and other places in the world where coal is a very valuable resource and they have large quantities of it, I could see these plants being deployed not only for their power generation capability, but also for the supply of CO2 for things like enhanced oil recovery. So one of the benefits that the United States has that a lot of people don't understand is we have large domes of CO2 in the United States, geologic domes that are then piped to various oil fields and pushed in the ground for tertiary recovery. The rest of the world doesn't have the benefit of having large natural sources of CO2. And those natural sources of CO2 are very low cost. And so if you could have a technology that could convert the coal not only into electricity, but also into a valuable byproduct in the form of pure CO2, they could get enhanced ancillary benefits from these power systems.
Excellent. Damien, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you.
Continuing on with our discussions from Park City, Utah, I'm Steve Reed with American Coal Council, and I'm now joined by Mike Nazi, who is a partner at Jackson Walker LLP. Mike is going to be speaking here in a little bit at our conference. And Mike, how about you give us a little synopsis of what you're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, you bet. So in my day job, I'm an environmental regulatory lawyer. So I represent people who are in the power generation sector, do a lot of work with the coal sector. And so we're going to talk about how the Department of Energy and the Environmental Protection Agency are doing things to reform both the way the grid is operating and the ability to actually retain critical assets like coal-fired generation, and how they're doing it in a legally durable way. The problem we've had, frankly, in the back and forth of the White House changing hands between parties has been this kind of Groundhog Day effect, where you wake up 4 years later and it's the same set of rules coming back on the books. And so, when the Trump administration was first elected, in 2016, I'm not saying it was the dog who caught the bus, but there wasn't nearly as much kind of awareness about how hard it would be, how much preparatory work needed to be done. So this time around, they're much more ready. It's clear, it's evident in how much they've already gotten done. And it's certainly clear in the way they're doing it. They are, the press kind of characterizes it all as kind of burning the house down, but it's actually much more sophisticated. As a nerdy environmental lawyer, we're tracking everything they're doing. We're collaborating as much as we can. I do some work on behalf of states as well, and the states are getting a lot of input. And, what's been proposed, nothing's final yet, at least in the big rules, is really smart. It's not the kind of thing that's going to be easy to dismantle, either at the courthouse or by a different administration. And that plays out most obviously in the greenhouse gas rulemaking, but it's true in each and every rule that they'll be working on.
Yeah. Well, you talk about, not being at the political whims, and that's critical, obviously, for long-term investment, especially in the power industry. I know FERC's had concerns about grid reliability for a long time, which they voiced and generally fallen on deaf ears.
Right.
So, with that, what do you see happening with like Clean Power Plan 2 that will be durable, like you said? I love the word durable.
Yeah.
and to where these power companies can make long-term investments and plans that will be sustainable.
The first in 2016, the kind of game plan was durability looked like we'll do an efficiency standard. We'll stay within the confines of the Clean Air Act as guided by the Supreme Court. And we'll put in a reg that sets, kind of locks in an efficiency standard so people can plan against it, called the Affordable Clean Energy Rule, the ACE rule. Well, the Biden administration and, frankly, the D.C. Circuit just have completely different views of how the Clean Air Act should go about being implemented, and wanted not an efficiency standard, wanted to force a technology that was, that I've spent a lot of time in my career trying to work on commercializing carbon capture technology, but basically mandate it and almost immediately nationwide,
even though it's not ready,
despite what geologic formation you might have in your area, despite what kind of pipeline infrastructure. And so, in this term, the Trump administration isn't just torching that rule because they don't like CCS. Department of Energy is going to continue to be serious in the R&D space and commercialization space on CCS, or CCUS to be a better word, because I think utilization of carbon is actually the better game plan, right? Yeah. But this time, doing the same thing all over again, expecting a different result, we know what that is. Yeah. It's the definition of insanity, and they're not doing that. Yeah. They're not going to just put an efficiency standard back in place so that a new administration can torch it. What they're doing is they're taking a harder look at the Clean Air Act, and there's this part of the act that I'm going to emphasize it because I've been saying this for over 15 years that nobody ever pays attention to, and it explicitly requires for power plant and other stationary source regulations that the agency has to conclude that the emissions being reduced were actually significantly contributing to endangerment of public health and welfare. We hear a lot about the endangerment finding, which was a tailpipe rule, Section 202 of the Clean Air Act rulemaking, and it was under a different standard. That standard is EPA simply needs to determine that carbon dioxide and other GHGs are causing or contributing to. And as a lawyer, contributing to could be me.
Yeah, it's
right now,
wide open.
right?
Wide open.
So
yeah.
that's a harder standard.
Yeah.
It's a potentially winnable standard, and the administration is going to try to do that in Section 202. But this time around, they're being really smart, and they're focusing in on that Section 111, specifically 111B1A, that says that significant contribution has to be found. And they've done the math. It's really a much better way of doing it because you're not actually engaging in a debate about climate science.
Yeah.
There's going to always be different opinions in the scientific community about how much man-made or anthropogenic CO2 is forcing climate outcomes. But one thing you can't debate is math, okay?
Right.
And the math is known in terms of what's the mass of emissions from the U.S. power sector? How does it compare to the global man-made mass?
Yes.
I mean, not even actually taking on that we should compare it to all CO2, right? Just man-made emissions. And that number is about 3%. And, many of us in a few states that I represent are advocating that they should actually go one step further and not really compare mass emissions to mass emissions. They should go right at the heart of it. How much do you change concentrations in the atmosphere globally?
Mm-hmm.
Again, not debating climate science, just math. How much does reducing X amount of tons in the U.S. reduce X amount of percentage of CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere? And that number is much lower. It's about 0.68%. It's not really debated.
And that's globally.
That's globally, right? So there they have extremely, safe ground. I mean, maybe even the DC Circuit's going to have to acknowledge that, 0.68% is not significant.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's the high water mark. The number's lower in most decades. So, again, that's not to say that a lot of people on the left have said, oh, they're attacking Massachusetts EPA, which was this important case that concluded that the EPA may regulate, and some argue must regulate carbon dioxide as a pollutant in the Clean Air Act. Well, that's not the question in 111. The question in 111 is there significant contribution to pollution globally? Right. So those are two different questions. So there's a lot of, it's almost like every time the administration does something, the opposite side already has its press release written about what they think the administration is going to do. And they're not paying attention because the administration is playing chess, not checkers. And the other side is going to be very sophisticated. They're going to have a PR campaign against it, but they're really doing something that I think will survive both Supreme Court review, maybe even DC Circuit review, but it's going to be much harder. If a new administration comes in, and it's a Democratic administration, they're going to have to confront the fact that you're going to have to prove that 0.68% is significant.
It's significant. Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And another really important point is the need for speed. The administration has done this work so soon, not rushed. They were very thoughtful about it, but they need to have a final rule out by the end of this year if it's realistic for us to have a Supreme Court decision rendered before the next election.
Right.
And so if you're looking for legal certainty, you want the Supreme Court to say, okay, this is the way you do it, and we bless it. And then the next administration is just faced with a double hurdle, right? It's got to debate the math, and it's faced with a precedent that affirmed that math
from the Supreme Court,
Court, which they can't ignore.
Yeah.
Although the Biden administration seemed to be pretty bold in how it was ignoring the West Virginia v. EPA case. They were on their way to losing that case. An election happened. The Trump administration has, stepped in to do the reforms, frankly, that were called for by the Supreme Court decision.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, it's good to hear that there is a good underlying roadmap and a good plan, especially for the future of our power reliability and competitiveness. So, well, Mike, thanks so much. I appreciate your time.
My
and
pleasure.
Look forward to your presentation
as
always.
Yeah.
And appreciate you guys joining.
Yeah. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you for tuning in to Coal Nation, the official podcast of the American Coal Council. Our mission is to share coal's story and showcase its critical role in powering our economy and supporting our way of life. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe. The American Coal Council represents members across the entire coal supply chain and advocates tirelessly for our vital industry. There is strength in numbers, and we'd love for you to be part of the conversation. By joining ACC, you gain exclusive access to the latest industry developments, a voice in our work that can benefit your business, and incredible networking opportunities. To learn more, visit www.americancoalcouncil.org. Together, we are shaping the future of coal. And it's exciting. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.